Good afternoon, everybody. Just waiting for a few more people to join, as we had a quite large volume register. Sometimes things come up at the last minute, so they may not be coming or they're still joining. So it won't be a moment and we'll get underway for our family migration webinar. So whilst we're waiting, Happy New Year. For those of you who don't know me, my name's Julie Williams. I'm a registered agent and I'm in my 25th year of being registered, and I was former national president and board chair of the board for the Migration Institute of Australia, which was our professional organisation. Just during today's webinar, it's for information only, and relationships and family relations come in all shapes and sizes, so there's no one fit for all, and I'm just giving you general advice. If you do require more specific advice for your individual circumstances, then you're free to contact me directly. The session is being recorded and will be sent, it says within 48 hours, but it may be early next week because of Rebecca, who is usually doing that for me, is still on annual leave. And questions can be submitted via the chat box, which I'll respond to at the end of the session. And during the webinar, we're not going to be sharing checklists or assessing your individual eligibility, but giving you an overview of what is happening with regards to family migration, in particular parents and partners. Now, I noticed someone's already put a question in the Q&A, which I will answer at the end. It does say anonymous attendee. I would like everybody to actually put their names up, please, for so that I do know who I'm addressing. That would be fabulous. Thank you very much. Well, we're going to get underway. As I discussed, what we're looking at today is the overview of parent visas, the eligibility and the process of parent visas, why the delays in processing for parent visas, not necessarily partner visas. Partner visas are going through very quickly, and looking at the overview of partners, eligibility and process, and then we'll have our Q&A session. The session will probably go for about 30 minutes, maybe a little bit over, and that will include the Q&A time. So let's look at parent visas to begin with, because many of you may be skilled migrants who have been here for a while or recently arrived and are looking at having your family or your parents in particular join you. Any parent of an Australian citizen or an Australian permanent resident may apply for a 3-year multiple re-entry visitor visa and can stay for up to a 12-month period. Many people are not aware of that. Generally speaking, if you do request over 12 months, they do require a medical examination, and for all parents over 70 for a visitor visa, they require a medical examination. Look, processing times vary for the visitor visa, but in general, they're usually done at the moment within sort of 2 to 4 weeks. There's also the sponsored 870 parent visa. This is a temporary visa, and it's for either a 3 or 5 year visa, dependent on the fee you pay, whether it's the $5,000 or the $10,000 fee. Processing times can vary, but I can give you some current experience on that. Firstly, for an 870 parent visa, you've got to lodge sponsorship, and the sponsorship will be by the child or a spouse of the child of the parent, and that is taking around about 2 months. And then once you lodge the visa application, that's probably taking about 6 weeks, I think, so quite quick. This is a good option for parents that want to be over here and be with their family. Perhaps you don't meet the balance of family, whereby you don't have the majority of children living and residing permanently in Australia. This is an option for you. You don't get any work rights on the 870 visa, and you do have to have a health insurance to cover that. The permanent parent visa, where it allows you to stay permanently, the processing has ballooned significantly, and I will talk through as to why that is the case later on in this session. And mainly it is it's demand. It's the demand outweighs supply. And even though they have increased the number of parent visas they're processing for this financial year, as they did for the last financial year, there still hasn't been a catch up. I mean, once upon a time, the contributory parent visa was able to be processed within a few months, and then it went sort of ballooned out to 12 months, 18 months, then 3 years. And now you're looking at least 7 or 8 years for the contributory parent visa. So, and the non-contributory, that is taking, well, anyone's guess, but it's 15 or 20 years. I've got parents still in the queue for that, and they're probably nearing about 12 years at the moment. So looking at contributory versus non-contributory, because that always is the question. And the contributory, there was always a big advantage of that because it meant you got your permanent residency quickly. And if anything occurred between, you know, having that granted and later on, if health deteriorated or what have you, you were in the sort of knowledge that you were covered and you were going to, and you already had your visa. You may or may not be aware that there is no health waiver for the parent visa. There's no health waiver for this temporary 870 visa, nor the permanent parent visa. And the health waiver, so you do require to meet the health requirement at the time of when they're assessing the application, and then again at the time of finalising the application. And so that's why the advantage was, and I'll go a bit more into health because I know that's always a big question. The contributory was always an advantage because you meant you had it. The non-contributory was only for those that maybe are of an old age where it didn't really matter whether they got the visa or not. The main aim was to be here in Australia and be allowed to remain with their family for the rest of days. So that was often a really good option. But when you're what I consider still young, you know, in your 60s and on a non-contributory visa waiting 20 years, it's an awfully long time to wait. So this, I'll go through them all and give you a little bit of the pros and cons. The subclass 804 parent visa is an onshore application. Now, one of the parents, so if you are a couple, if there's mother and father, then one of you has to be 67 years of age to be able to lodge an application whilst in Australia. The other, the secondary dependent, the spouse of the main applicant, doesn't have to be over 67 or over. And the reason for that is just for the sort of, I guess, aging population in Australia, the burden on the health system, etc., even though you'd be having to pay your own way. So if you were to lodge a non-contributory subclass 804 in Australia, you would get a bridging visa, and the bridging visa allows you to remain here until a decision is made on that application, which again could take 15 or 20 years. Interestingly, on the bridging visa A, you do get full work rights. So if you do wish to work, then you're free to do so. I've got many clients who are parent on the wait list for their non-contributory. I've had some actually paying Santa Claus. I've had others a lot working in Bunnings, some in aged care working or as a carer. So it does give you work rights if you are inclined to want to continue working. It doesn't give you access to Medicare. The only time it gives you access to Medicare is if you're from a country that has reciprocal Medicare rights. So, for example, if you're a UK citizen, you have to have been living in the UK. Don't quite remember the minimum requirement because it's a Medicare question more than a visa question. But generally speaking, I think you've got to have been living there for 12 months if you're a dual citizen and living in another country to access Medicare. Otherwise, you do have to make arrangements for your own health. And the subclass 143 is the contributory parent visa. There is no age restriction because it's an offshore application. You can lodge that whilst you're in Australia because all parent visa applications are paper-based, and they're all lodged through the Perth Processing Centre in Western Australia. You don't get a bridging visa if you lodge that in Australia because it's an offshore application. The subclass 864 is just the same as the 143, yet is onshore. So if you're 67 or older, or one of you 67, you can lodge whilst in Australia and access the bridging visa and remain here. The subclass 173 is a contributory offshore parent visa, and it's a temporary visa, although I don't really recommend it. It used to be great when the contributory 143 was taking a long time. Some people wanted to space out when they paid that second visa application charge, which is $43,600. The $43,600 is not payable until a case officer has assessed you've met all the health character requirements, assurance and support, and not until they're ready to grant the visa do they request that $43,600. So when they were only taking a year, maybe 3 years, people wanted to space out that payment and pay 2/3 at one time and then a third within 2 years of being granted that 173. There's really no advantage because the 143 that's taking 6-7 years, you've got sufficient time to be able to save towards that second visa application charge. There is an offshore non-contributory. I haven't put it up there. It's really there's no point doing that if it's going to be taking 20 years and you want to be able to come out to Australia, then really there's no advantage of that particular visa. You would lodge something onshore, or you do the contributory that is slightly quicker. Now, I was going to say something else in regards to, the 804 or the aged parent non-contributory used to be the only class of visa that was given a Q date. And by that, I mean they start assessing the application within a few years of the lodgement to see if you meet health and character up front so that they can see that you're still eligible for that visa, and you go on the queue. And then once you're on the queue, you then wait for all that time. And they've introduced that from 2018 for the contributory parent visa as well. And they've only just started actually implementing that in the last few months. So some of you who are probably not clients if you're on this webinar, but a lot of my clients are getting a Q date automatically without having to do anything that may have lodged a visa in 2018-19 because that's what they're just trying to catch up with everything. So they're giving you a Q date. So that means you've met all that first initial criteria, including health. So as I said, health is a tricky one. It's something that you do need to continue to meet the criteria for, and you do actually have to be able to have that at the time of the queue and also the finalisation. And that's, you never know with us all how health is going to turn out in the future. There are options there. If you happen to be in Australia, it's much better position than if you were outside of Australia and not meeting the health requirement, because there is other options where you could sort of go through the process of having the visa refused. You can go through the appeals tribunal, which takes a long time, so that further sort of delays the process. You can also access a medical treatment visa if you're not meeting the health requirement and you are not fit to travel, then you can also access that. So there are sort of means and ways, but again, it all changes, and let's sort of watch this space. The government was talking about changing the parent visa, and they were looking at parent visa and perhaps stopping this pathway and introducing a lottery system, but it's not on the radar right at the moment. They're more concerned with the skill migration at the moment, and that's what they're targeting for 2024. Obviously, if there are any changes to that, we will be certain to keep you updated, but it's certainly not in the pipeline for the next financial year. And just for those of you who are not aware of our financial years, they begin from July through to the end of June. So basic requirements for permanent parent visa, you need to meet the balance of family. So you've got to have the balance of your children all living here in Australia. You can't have one in UK, for example, one in Africa, and then one in Australia. You don't meet that requirement. 2 out of those 3 would have to be here in Australia. It includes all stepchildren as well, half children. If you are in a relationship or your parents are in a relationship with perhaps not your biological father or mother, then that partner's children will be included in that balance of family as well. Be in good health, which I mentioned, and also you can't be the holder of an 870 visa when you're applying for the permanent parent visa. So if you're wanting to access the 870 and the permanent, the only way around that is lodging the permanent parent visa, which I highly recommend, because you then get it in that queue and you're not affected by any future changes that occur. And then you can actually apply for an 870, which many of the parents do if they have the financial ability to do so, because if they're waiting 5-7 years, at least they've got that temporary visa to come out, especially if they've got young grandchildren or you've got children, if you're the child of the parent applicant, and they want to come out and help with childcare and just be part of your family, they can do that. And you have to have an assurance of support at time of decision, and that is doesn't necessarily have to be the child. It can be a friend, it can be anybody that has been working for 2 years and has been paid taxes and meeting the requirements of that amount that has to be there for the assurance of support. I can't give you a figure on that because it changes each year according to the Department of Human Services and also dependent on individual circumstances. So, $1 million question. Why do parent visas take so long to process? The reason being they're capped each year, and the last 2 years it has increased to 8,500 each year. And I did put a newsletter out to all my clients, and I did have something on the website, and I can't think of the actual number that's in the pipeline, but it's quite a large volume that are in the pipeline. So you can see when there is only 8,500 spaces and there is maybe 100,000 people waiting for that, why the continued wait. They cap it because of aging population, the burden on our health, etc., health system, I should say, and they are promoting the skilled migrants. But they do have to look at parents, because as they continue to promote skilled migration, there's always going to be the desire and the need for the skilled migrants to then want their parents here. There's also changes to planning levels. It changes every time. It's always a political hot potato. So it does go up and down. And that's why I say to everybody, if you're eligible, don't delay it. Put it in, get it in there, have it in the queue. Because when it's taking so long, things can change over that time, and having that reassurance of having it there is always good. As I said, demand outweighs the supply, and then there's also fluctuations due to visa grants, refusals, applications being withdrawn. So it does go up and down, and it does change quite a lot. So that's the parent visas, and I will answer any questions that perhaps now, if anyone has them. I'm not sure if the chat, I think the chat box is enabled. Otherwise, there's a Q&A as well, if you wanted to put a question in there regarding parents before I go on to the partners. Otherwise, I can always answer these at the end. Okay, I do see a question in there about skilled migration, but sorry, it's not relevant to the webinar, so I'm not going to answer that today. The types of partner visas, the good news with partner visas, they are processing super quick. The onshore applications are being done within, quite quickly, within sort of probably about 2 months. sometimes a little quicker. It has slowed down a bit because of the Christmas, New Year holidays, but partner visas are all being processed very quickly. Offshore, depending on where you're from, are also being processed quickly, and it's also dependent on the on your set of circumstances and where you are located in the world. Some offshore processing centres, even though it's all lodged online, are slower than others, and others are a lot more efficient. So it can vary depending on which location you are, but on the whole, they're going through quite quickly, which is really good. Understanding stages of relationship, boyfriend, girlfriend, de facto. I get a lot of people coming to me saying, oh, my girlfriend, my boyfriend. Look, unfortunately, a partner visa is specifically for a married or de facto spouse, and you're in a committed married or de facto relationship. You don't just sort of aren't in a casual relationship, or maybe you're in a committed boyfriend-girlfriend relationship, and you may live together and you may live with other people, but it's all dependent on whether you've combined your household and your finances to that level of a de facto relationship. And that's something that we here at Migration Downunder are able to assist you and work through that as to how that can change. The only difference between a marriage and a de facto relationship is that of the marriage certificate. So you do have to be able to provide the same level of evidence for de facto as you do with the married relationship. So who can sponsor somebody for a partner visa? You've got to be over 18 years of age. You can't have previously sponsored someone within the last 5 years. There are exceptional circumstances if a partner has passed away, if there's children involved, different sort of circumstances, there can be some exemptions, but they're very limited. And as a sponsor, you've also got to pass the, sorry, a little bit too quick, got to pass the character test as well. So you've got to make sure that you meet all the character for that partner visa, as a sponsor. It's to protect the applicants and to protect some of those that are more vulnerable, that are coming from countries that are maybe not English speaking and are not aware of their rights. And that's what they do that for. Mainly checking for domestic violence and, things that might affect children, etc. Just safeguarding the visa applicant. It's a two-step process, the partner visa. If the relationship is less than 3 years old, then you will be assessed as whether you meet the requirements for a de facto or married partner visa. And if you do, but you haven't been in a relationship for 3 years, you'll get that provisional visa, which comes with work rights, multiple re-entry into Australia, access to Medicare. If you have been in a relationship for greater than 3 years at the time we lodged the application, then you'll parachute straight to permanent residency and don't need to go through that two-step process. So what they look at for partner visas is 4 pillars of the relationship. They look at the nature of the household. So when we refer to nature of the household, who else lives there? Do they live there just on their own? If they're living, and it is acceptable as, rent gets so much more expensive, more scarce, especially in cities like Melbourne and Sydney. It's understandable that some partners still live with parents. They might have their own living space, separate kitchen, etc. And that's all fine. And it's just a matter of showing how the nature of the household, who's sort of responsible for what, payment of bills, duties and responsibilities, such as sort of the main day-to-day sort of shopping, groceries, cleaning, cooking, etc. All those mundane things that we all don't necessarily all like to do. The mutual commitment, they look at the level of commitment you've got. Maybe that's with children, maybe that's purchase of a property, maybe it's even getting an animal, maybe it's future plans that you've got in place. It could be as simple as a future overseas trip plan, things that you've got committed to in the future. It might be other things like that you've committed to purchasing something for the home, purchasing something together, gone into a sort of, it might be as simple as furniture or what have you, and you've both sort of joined forces to finance that. Then they look at the financial aspects, whilst, you know, on the website it says a joint bank statement doesn't necessarily have to be a joint bank account. There's plenty of other ways to show how you share financial responsibilities in this day and age. Not everyone has a joint bank account. So it's more about how you pull your financial commitments together and who pays for what, how you share that responsibility, etc. Other things might be that if you're here in Australia, you might be listed on each other's superannuation as beneficiaries. Social aspects is the social side of how your relationship is viewed, as to whether you are accepted by family and friends as being in a de facto or married couple. And that can be verified by invitations, photos together with your family and friends, statements from family and friends verifying the length of the relationship, the level of commitment, etc. So that's usually the easy part of that 4 pillars of the partner visa. In Australia here, most states, except Western Australia, I think Northern Territory, I think that's about the only ones that don't accept the registration of a relationship. But a lot of people, if they don't meet the 12 months evidence of living together in a de facto relationship, go and register their relationship to overcome that 12 months, because it's the same as a marriage certificate. If you're married, you don't need to have any certain evidence of length of relationship. You just have to show that you're living together in a committed relationship. And the registration of a relationship, while it's fairly straightforward, it doesn't cost a huge amount. It's not necessarily going to guarantee the approval, or that's going to sort of get you across the line. You still need to provide all other evidence to support the application as to your relationship. Potential pitfalls, I think I had, that was one of them, sorry. Another one too is not being able to evidence that you're in a genuine and committed relationship. Sometimes people struggle on how they should be showing that. And it's all, again, down to the down to the individual, I should say. And there's plenty of different ways that we can express and be able to show that. Often it looks at the length of the relationship. So if you've been in a relationship for some time, maybe you've been separated because one of you is in one country, another is in Australia, and that commitment of being able to travel back and forth and maintain contact throughout those periods of absence, that is a good way of doing that. Often if you marry within a short period of knowing one another and not living together, that's often one that does have sort of disaster written all over it. A lot of people marry thinking that's the secret to getting them across the line. Again, marrying is not alone, it's not going to get you across the line. Although we do respect and understand, as the Australian government does, there's some cultures where it's an arranged marriage, and they do get married within a short period of knowing and being introduced to each other, and that's perfectly acceptable. We've done a lot of those applications. And you may not live together because the Australian citizen needs to come back to Australia because of work commitments, etc. That's perfectly acceptable. But things that you've got to look out for and things we can assist you with. So we are with questions, and I've got a few questions in the box, so I'll just have a look. Hi, Mark Bear. Please clarify the process of applying for an onshore for an 864. So far, we've understood tourist visa and the bridging visa whilst on a tourist visa. Yes, so what it is, if you come out to Australia on, say, a subclass 600 tourist visa or visitor visa, you can, and one of you is 67 years of age or older, you can come into Australia on that visitor visa and you can lodge your subclass 864. As soon as you lodge that visa or shortly thereafter, you'll be issued with a bridging visa A. And that bridging visa A, what that does, it bridges you over to allow you to remain lawfully in Australia. And as I mentioned, also gives you work rights from when the visitor visa or the tourist visa expires and until the 864 visa is approved. So that could be you know, a 6-7 year, maybe longer period of time that you have to remain on that bridging visa in Australia. Now, the bridging visa, as again, does give you work rights. It won't give you access to Medicare, so you will have to make arrangements for health insurance. And bridging visa A doesn't allow you to travel outside of Australia and back in, but what you do is apply for a bridging visa B. That currently costs $190, and you can combine that in one application. If there's two of you, you can travel overseas and you can return back on that bridging visa B. Generally speaking, they grant them for 12 months for parents, so you would be able to travel in and out for 12 months on that bridging visa B, and you can always reapply for another one later down the track for that. The tourist visa or the visitor visa, subclass 600, you can apply for a 3-year multiple re-entry, and you can remain here for 12 months in any 18-month period. But if you're looking at lodging the 864 visa, then you really only need to do the standard 600 visa. There's no difference in cost between the 3-year or the shorter tourist visa as well. Arriving on the tourist visa, you don't have to be 67. You could be any age to arrive on the tourist visa. It doesn't matter for age, but you do have to be 67 if you are then seeking to lodge an 864. So I hope that's helped answer your questions. Just see if there's anybody else that's got any other questions. No? Well, thank you very much for joining me this afternoon or this morning, depending on where around the world you may be. We do continually have webinars. We've got another one scheduled for next week, just specifically for partners. We do others for skilled migration and other various different categories. But if you did want some information for your individual circumstances, all our contact details are there. You can send through to info or our phone number. Be aware we've only just returned back to work this week after being on a holiday over the Christmas New Year break. We've had 2 weeks off. So info box is inundated. So if you have sent an email through that, I apologise if we haven't got back to you. We've still got a few staff away. So again, thank you so much for joining me this afternoon, and I wish you well for the rest of the week. Take care. Thank you very much, everybody.